Today's April 27th, 2021. I'm BrentNally, and I'm really excited to be here with the creator of the Sheekey Science Show, an awesome YouTube channel that I've been watching for months, almost a year. I think it was started in April of 2020. And Eleanor Sheekey is here. Eleanor, how's it going?
Hey Brent, no, it's good, thanks. Thank you for the introduction. It was actually started back in June of 2019, so it's coming up for almost 2 years for me, actually.
Wow. Okay. That's really exciting. And let me give you a little proper introduction, and then maybe you can share a little bit more details. So you have a master's degree in natural sciences biochemistry from Peterhouse University of Cambridge. And then you're also getting your PhD currently right now in cancer research at UK Cambridge Institute. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, thanks. Yeah.
Okay. And then there you also started a YouTube channel in 2019, as we just discussed. So, Eleanor, how do you find the time to do all this? It's very impressive.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So I mean, starting the YouTube channel was something I've wanted to do for a very long time. So I've always had a really big passion for science communication. And that probably started around the first year of my undergrad. And so my undergrad was very intense and there wasn't too much time to really, do much science communication. And most of my science communication at the time was probably just writing academic essays. Um, and so I did actually start a blog back, I think, in my second year of undergrad, where I would just basically I've read something, an article or something, and try to summarize it in my own words and just share it out to the world. It didn't really pick up too much traction, but like the long-term plan was always to start a YouTube channel. But as you probably know as well, if you want to start a YouTube channel, you want to be consistent to be able to grow a following. So I think I just made a mental note to myself that I would just wait and find a time when I didn't feel so busy. And to me, that perfect time was when I finished my master's, and I had about 3 months between finishing my master's before starting my PhD, where I was going to have like some 3 months of fun, I suppose. But that was basically my 3 months where it was like it was a test to myself if I could commit to something. And I guess, well, the rest of history, I'm still here. So it
The,
worked
the
out.
the rest is certainly history, Eleanor, and you're certainly not only still here, but doing fantastic work. And I love your channel. I love the way that you explain things. And I think you're even continuing to improve and iterate on your channel, the Sheekey Science Show, and getting better and better. And so it's really exciting. And I commend you for having this long-term strategy and executing. Just a real quick bit about myself. I did not know all that stuff about YouTube, about consistency. I I've been watching YouTube for a long time. I was an early adapter, but and I did think, well, why don't I start making some videos? But I was like working a corporate job for many years. I graduated college in 2007, and I now know way more about YouTube, and I know all the things that I did totally wrong. And for at this point, my Brent Nally channel that we're on right now, it's just like for fun to interview people and stuff, and I can't commit to being consistent with it. So and my channel's probably destroyed from the algorithms from the way that I, you know, grown it improperly over the years. But in any event, yeah, you've done it really well and intelligently, and I love your content. The most important thing is that you're getting the science correct, in my opinion, which is so rare. So I'd love to shift the conversation right now to a little bit of your backstory about how you got interested in longevity. Was it interest in longevity first, and then you decided to get into a science, degree and go that route, or was it the opposite, or was it kind of a little bit of both? What's your story with that?
So definitely the science was first. So I guess that comes back from the decision to choose science for university. And for me, I always think I knew I enjoyed biology the most, but was like studying chemistry, physics as well. And the thing that really fascinated me most about biology was just understanding the fact that we have the same set of DNA within all of our cells, yet our cells are doing different things. And that comes down to the fact that they're expressing different genes at different times. And understanding that process was just like, it seemed like such a big unknown at the time when I was like only 16, 17, and it was just something I wanted to learn more about. And so I guess that was why I chose the degree that I took. And it wasn't until I, was open to the world of biochemistry, which is huge and ever growing, that there was one kind of assignment we were given. I think it was in my third year, where we were told to do a project on science and society. And they set us a variety of different essays that were meant to take our biochemical knowledge and apply it more to the real world situation, because apparently us biochemists just focus about proteins and reactions, and that's all we care about. And one of the questions was along the lines of, can we extend human lifespan? What would be like the societal implications? And I think for those like month and a bit we had to write this essay, I read so much review articles, so many papers, watched so many videos on YouTube, and just became fascinated by the topic. And then I think in my fourth year, my master's year, we had further lectures specifically talking about the aging process. And I think I just found it so fascinating how it brought so many concepts of biochemistry that I learned in different modules and kind of brought them all together. Because, I mean, as you know, aging is just associated with pretty much everything, right, in the body. Like, end of the day, it's been linked to so many different hallmarks, it's been linked to so many different diseases, and so understanding them separately made more sense to study aging itself. And I think that's where the interest came from.
Very cool. Now, was that unique to you in your class there with just your personal classmates, or did you see that kind of epiphany occurring with other of your classmates as well?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think I was always the bit of the extreme, not a nerd, but definitely very keen for all of our essays and stuff. But I mean, we did obviously have lectures. Everyone got their lectures on aging, even though only some of us wrote the essay. But I think at the time, I mean, we're young, we're undergrads, we're enjoying ourselves. It's not something we really think too much. So yeah, I mean, I don't really remember having like specific conversations about longevity research at the time. But I think as well, my understanding back then was tiny compared to what it is now. So maybe I wasn't educated enough to even be having these sort of conversations.
Yeah, and that's, pretty typical answer that we get. And I've been researching longevity since around 2005, and most people still think that I'm crazy. My friends and family don't understand why I like quit my high-paying job at LinkedIn and Microsoft in February of 2018 to like try and solve the human aging problem. It seems nuts to most people. But Eleanor, I think that we're going to be having like the last laugh, so to speak, in a few years or decades and things like that. We'll see how the future plays out. But yeah, the point is that it's not obvious to everybody up front. In fact, most people, it's not obvious at all. But I'm the type of person, I just want to get to the root cause of any type of problem. I want the absolute root cause. And if you look at, the huge problems that we have in our medical system and with our healthcare system globally, I think the biggest root cause problem is that aging is not seen as a medical, problem that could actually be intervened on. That there's actually things you can do to slow, stop, and reverse aging. So that's a big part of my mission of changing that. And I know that's, similar mission to you and the channel.
No, completely agree. So
you mentioned also your communication. So I want to point out, you were part of the Journal of Young Investigators for about 3.5 years. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Sure. Yeah. So that was also, so when I mentioned in my undergrad, I was doing a bit of like blog writing. So part of that stemmed from working for this journal. And basically what happened was every month, or we had like certain writing cycles where I would pick a research paper and write an article, and then I would work with an editor, so another undergrad who could be at any other different university, and we just worked together in terms of crafting basically a summarization of that research paper. And so I think that was useful for me because it was a way of trying to condense a scientific paper into a shortened format, but also in a way that anyone could kind of read it and understand it. And I guess it was, for me, I think of it as like a training for where I am now. It was just like a good way of learning how to communicate science effectively. And then I started there being the writer. And then after doing that for about 2 years, I then became an editor where I would edit other people's work. So that also was really useful for me to do that. And then just to extend from this, because after I left this journal and decided to start my own blog because, wanted a bit more freedom. In my blogs, I tended to have a lot more diagrams. And so when I used to write essays for my undergrads, I always liked the fact that I wasn't very good at explaining things in words. I always preferred to draw pictures and diagrams. And in fact, I definitely remember essays where there's probably more pictures than words. I mean, that's not quite possible, but that's how it felt. And I think that's also where it then stemmed into me wanting to go to YouTube and making videos, because you can then make an animated understanding of my brain as opposed to something that I write, because I just find it easier to explain something visually than just with words.
I definitely do too. And personally, I've studied a lot of different ways that people learn. My last job I mentioned was at LinkedIn, and I was selling e-learning. So I know quite a bit about e-learning and different ways that people learn. And so I know that I'm a visual learner. And there's that, age old saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, there's about 30 frames in a second in video content. So if you do the math, that's like 30,000 words per second. So I think that YouTube is still just getting started, and video content on the internet is still just getting started. So I always try to encourage my audience, if you want to get into podcasting, video content creation, if it's something that you're passionate about, then do it. Eleanor right here, the woman that I'm speaking to right now, is a perfect example of somebody who has had a plan and executed. And I think the sky's the limit for you and for your Sheekey Science Show channel. So on that note, I always put detailed descriptions in the show notes and the description on my YouTube video. So check the description below. I'm going to have a link to the Sheekey Science Show's YouTube channel. If you're not already subscribed, then what are you doing? Pause it right now. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, click the notification bell, and select all notifications. It's really important for the algorithm that you do that. And if you want to help us solve the human aging problem, that's one of the easiest, simplest things you can do that is free and only takes a few moments. I'll also have Eleanor's LinkedIn profile there, your Twitter profile. Are there any other social media links or any other types of forms of communication you'd want me to put in there so that people can get in contact with you or follow you and your Sheekey Science Show?
Probably Twitter and just YouTube itself is probably the easiest way. I do also have a Facebook page that I basically just copy whatever I put on Twitter onto that. So if you prefer Facebook, then that works. But yeah, that's about it.
Perfect. I'll include that as well too. Are you doing Facebook Watch, or you're just linking the YouTube videos on Facebook, I assume, right?
Just linking the YouTube video, yeah.
For now, but watch out for Eleanor. Get into the Facebook Watch game soon enough. Okay, so yeah, so make sure that you do that. It's really important. So please subscribe, follow her on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well too. So Eleanor, let's kick it to you. What did you have in mind as far as how your channel would progress? I like how the channel is evolving, and I love the video format that you have with this very unique form of this graphical, these pictures that you create and your art. I want to know a little bit about your little Sheekey Science Show character. How did you come up with all this? The story is fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, it kind of is fascinating to me too. Who knows what goes on in here sometimes. But I guess, so the blog was called a Sheekey Science blog. And as I said, making YouTube videos was always the main aim. And I think there was a conversation I had all the way back in sixth form, so when I was 16, 17, where I remember saying to people that I just wanted to have my own TV show. And I said I had a really clever name for it. It'd be the Sheekey Science Show. And so I think I stick to my words, and here I am later making it. Honestly, I don't really know where the idea for the animated character came from. I think I played about with different ways of creating the videos. I initially started doing just PowerPoints and presentations that I had recorded, but I didn't stick with that because I found it just took a long time to make the PowerPoint basically. And I had bought already a drawing pad to make for my blog, animated, or not animated, just drawings of my sketches. And so I had the idea of just recording as I was sketching, And that's kind of where it progressed into like the more video format. And I think just to make it more, I know, friendly or something, I didn't want to have my face. So I thought I'll just animate myself instead. And I mean, even
why didn't you want your face on there? Is that something you can share? You just didn't want to be on there?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I think because the way the videos were very animated, and so I think it just seemed a bit abnormal to suddenly have a human face along with it. I don't know. I think that plus I probably just didn't like taking my photos, so I thought I might as well just draw myself. Plus, I could add in extra sciencey details such as my hair in the animated version is actually like DNA strands, but
yeah. I've been a big fan of like South Park and Family Guy for many, many years, like watched every episode of South Park. And one of the cool things that they can do with those shows, because it's animated, is like they're all fake made up characters. Now yours is a little different. Yours is a caricature of yourself, right? But one of the things that you can do is it gives like creative expression and a different type of creative, what's the word I'm looking for? Leeway, where you can do certain things that you're not really liable for if it's a fake character. Again, yours is like really you, but as you just mentioned, you can do cool things like making your hair into DNA, which obviously wouldn't be as easy if it was actually like, you know, your real hair as we see you in the flesh right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm a big like animation fan. Like I've always loved Pixar films as a kid. I always watch them now, but like I was saying to a friend the other day, the thing I should say with animation is you can control where like the camera position is because there's no limitations. So it definitely gives a lot more freedom in terms of the creation. Like I'd love to be able to improve my skills and actually make the animations, like the character animations, a bit better and bring that a bit more into the videos.
Do you have a plan for that, or is that like going to be like super expensive to do it? Is that why you haven't done it? Yeah.
Yeah, the plan is I definitely need a new laptop because the one I currently use just crashes after like 5 seconds of any kind of animation on After Effects. So yeah, that's something I need to work on.
Okay, cool. We could maybe talk about that on offline. Would love to help out on that. And I've heard you in the past. I think you replied to somebody's comment or something on YouTube. You use a Microsoft tool, right, for all the writing and stuff that's on your channel?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. It's the whiteboard app that I then just record my screen as I do it. That's pretty much what it is. I guess I'm kind of screwed if that app disappears, but I guess there's always different apps, right?
You'll find something else. It's super cool. And you know, my last job, as I said, was at Microsoft. I mean, they can close down projects or whatever at the drop of a hat because they're just massive conglomerate. But yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen. So maybe let's just shift the conversation at this point to the actual science of longevity. What have you personally learned, you know, from having your channel that you think maybe you wouldn't have learned if you didn't have your channel? So if that makes sense, this is coming from me as well too. I have a YouTube channel and I host Lifespan News now. I feel like I'm learning so much more from like producing Lifespan News and all the interviews that I've done on my BrentNally channel, interviewing all these experts and building relationships with these people. This is just something that like I would not have that perspective if I wasn't doing this. So with that in mind, what's your story and your perspective on that from doing your channel and your knowledge of the science of aging?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like my mind has been opened so much from just starting the channel. And in many ways, one of the reasons I started it was to benefit myself and like to help me learn more and kind of document it. But it's been amazing how much content, like I've looked back on some of my videos and it's ranged from all sorts of different aspects of aging, because obviously when I first learned about it, I think most people come across the hallmarks of aging. And it's just very complicated. And if you delve into each of those hallmarks, you just get a mass of all these different like biochemical pathways, different proteins, different genes. And I think for me, well, given what I'm studying now, the one that kind of stood out for me was cellular senescence. And I think that was probably the one I initially focused on quite a lot and tried to learn a lot about. And the reason I found cellular senescence the most interesting was just the fact that it kind of seems to have this like antagonistic pleiotropy to the fact that in many ways senescent cells are good. They're good for wound healing, they're good for development, they're good for secreting these inflammatory factors to mediate activate the immune cells to come in and clear them. But then you have the side effects or the downsides to them, that if they're not cleared and they just keep on secreting these pro-inflammatory factors, then it can have deleterious effects. And to me, that just felt like such a big challenge, that it was such a complicated, how are these senescent cells made? How are they being regulated at the biochemical level? How is their inflammatory factors and different secretory factors being regulated? Does it vary depending on the senescent cell? Where are these senescent cells accumulating? It just felt like such a very complicated issue. And I really like complicated problems to try and solve, right? So I think I was definitely attracted to that. And also the lab that I'm doing my PhD in is a lab where we focus on cellular senescence, albeit in the cancer perspective, but obviously in many ways, cellular senescence is, cancer is in many ways age associated. So it all kind of goes together anyway.
Yeah, really good and detailed answer. And I can also share, I also love trying to solve really difficult problems. And I did a lot of puzzles with my grandmother and stuff when I was younger and things like that. I played some video games here and there. And the video games that you could beat, or like you had a 10,000 piece puzzle, once it's done, it's like satisfying in one way, but it's also like, all right, well, that's done. I could mush it all up and try it over again, but I've already done that. Solving the human aging problem to me is the most complex problem that I know of. It's the most important problem that we could be spending our time on working. And most people's perception of this on the planet is just so off, because they think like, the media has a lot of negative articles of like, oh, the elite are just trying to live forever and blah, blah, blah. It's going to make inequality worse. And it's like, well, we're really just trying to keep people as healthy as possible, make them as healthy as possible, and then keep them as healthy as possible. That's all I'm really trying to do with my work. And I think you're nodding your head. It seems like the same for you. So it's just frustrating that, most people just don't see it that way, because, eventually aging, I try to say this on every single one of my interviews. So in case people don't know, aging kills about 110,000 people every single day on average globally. Aging or age-related diseases, heart disease being the first, cancer being the second. And that's out of about 150,000 people that are dying globally on average every single day. So aging is killing about 2/3 or maybe a little bit more of people every single day on average globally. But that's not just like they're killing them like a car accident. Car accidents are killing about 3,000 people on average globally. But, those people have a quick and sudden death in most cases, and it's really sad and it's awful. But aging is like this gradual thing that's like gets worse and worse and worse, and it affects them mentally, physically, psychologically, emotionally, and financially, and their families. So if we can make any type of an impact on that, then we're having like a really good positive impact on society, and the trickle down effect to the economy, people getting back into the workforce. If they're healthier, it could be massive. So that's my perspective on it, Eleanor. Is there anything there that I said that you disagree with, or what's your perspective?
No, I agree. And like, I like to think I'm trying to contribute as well. I mean, I think sometimes
you definitely are. You're doing a great job. And I know you're just getting started too.
So I think for me, I want to obviously educate, but also explain why, because I think that's just how for me, if I was going to be told something, I want to know, well, why is that happening? And so I'd probably go in sometimes too much detail for like the layperson, but I think it's there if people want it. I think why take a certain supplement if you can't understand what it's doing, what it's interacting with, or why we're investigating these compounds in the first place? So I think that's, giving some kind of like science education. Well, I'm a scientist, I'm going to say that. But I think it's really important.
Definitely. And, one of the things that I've been thinking about, and that, I work with LEAF, the Life Extension Advocacy Foundation. They're the parent of Life Extend Show, where I host Lifespan News. One of the things that we've been thinking about is, because the general perception of most of the people on the planet is that, aging is just natural. There's nothing you can do about it. You shouldn't, play God. Most people have these beliefs, which are all, basically incorrect. I mean, lots of things are natural. None of the things that we're doing right now is natural. The headphones in your ears, the virtual technology we're using, the house that I'm in, most of the food that I'm going down and to eat when I break my fast after this interview has already been genetically modified. So the natural fallacy is, you know, something that you have to work on with people. But my point is that we need to think of more creative ways to come to people speaking their language and from their perspective to get them to understand the aging science. And so I'm sure you're thinking about these things as well. Do you have any ideas for your channel of like doing more of like a mainstream healthy type thing? And as your channel grows, you get more subscribers, then the algorithms on YouTube might be able to get you to get more viewers on that. And then you could pull in, we could convert, you know, a new audience of not necessarily longevity people, and we could convert them in just like you were converted in your school, in your class that you mentioned. So do you have any ideas and thoughts for that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, at the moment, I think the natural progression is for me to start doing more interviews myself, which I've already done one for my channel. So that's something I want to build upon. But I think long term, what I'd love to do is be able to actually maybe go, so to make it more maybe mainstream would be to obviously not ditch completely the animations, but to maybe integrate it a bit more with myself, but like myself. So potential idea is Sheekey Science Show on the road, where I'd actually go to places, talk to people in person, and go to different companies, different research labs, whatever I can really think of. Obviously, I was thinking probably more of a post-pandemic plan, but yeah, no, I think I definitely have ideas, and I hope that they would be maybe more appealing to a more broader audience. Yeah, I think for me, it's just finding the time to do it, right? At the moment, I think I've got a nice steady pace that I can do my videos at. And I find that a lot of the time, what I talk about is relevant to my own PhD work. So that kind of helps me out in terms of the time commitment, and also my own interests. But yeah, no, I think there's many possible like routes that could go down. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, those are really exciting ideas, and I can't wait to see you produce some of that content. And I will link in the show notes below. So check the show notes if you haven't already seen your awesome interview with, is it Dr. Liu? It's Liu. Did I pronounce that right?
David Liu.
Okay, yeah, David Liu. So I'll link that in the show notes. It was your first interview. I thought you did fantastic, and he's a phenomenal, incredible human being. So I think, you know, some people like interviews, some people like short videos, you know, and I think both are important and they both have an audience. So, well, that's exciting. I can't wait to see some of that content like that.
Thank you.
So with you being, you know, getting your PhD right now, and when are you scheduled to have the PhD?
So my funding, I think, is for 4 years. So the aim would be for me to finish at some point at the midpoint of 2023. So just over 2 years.
Okay, that's really exciting. So how the heck do you do both? How are you doing a PhD and doing your channel? And then, you know, this might be a little bit intrusive. This is going to be on the internet, but how are you able to convince, you know, the staff that you're able to do both? And then I would imagine your channel's been growing. There must be some type of, I don't want to really use the word jealousy, but hopefully like your faculty staff is paying attention and be like, well, maybe we should be doing more of this, you know, like why is what I'm getting at is, how is it that little Eleanor Sheekey is like on her own creating this incredible channel? Why aren't big institutions working with people like you who have this talent to fund you and like to get, you know, your show bigger out there? I mean, it's kind of frustrating and mind boggling. And I know you've thought about this. I see your face as I'm saying this. So what's your perspective on all this? It's crazy, right?
I mean, I'm already amazed at how many subscribers I have. I mean, when I talk to people about it, like friends, family, like they also seem like I mean, I'm surprised. I think they're also somewhat surprised how many I have, given that often in many ways, I think that I gave very in detail to very specific topics. But I think I agree with you that some of these topics, obviously, we're talking about aging and they are of relevance to everyone. And so surely everyone would be interested in it. So yeah, no, I see both sides of it. In terms of like people recognizing it, I don't know, I still think my channel is quite small. And I think anyone who does use YouTube would know there's much bigger channels. And so maybe I haven't really caught attention yet. Plus it's not, I mean, I'm a very shy person, like as you're very confident in saying like and subscribe. That's something I just cannot bring myself to say on my videos. I think I now just show like an animation of like hit subscribe. Like I don't like to necessarily promote it to people I meet immediately. So I guess I'm quite a bit sly about it. I mean, again, I do most of the work in my spare time. Like for me, the PhD work is obviously something I've committed to for 4 years, and I am passionate about it and want to make that my priority. But I'm fortunate in the fact that the field that I'm studying in is so relevant to what I read and produce my channel anyway. So that kind of works in my favor.
Yeah, definitely. And I find the whole like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, it's super cringe, but it's something that like I just feel like I have to do because it's part of the game. I mean, we need to get the social media algorithms working more for us in the longevity community. So we have to kind of promote ourselves. And if we're not doing that, then it's like we're missing low-hanging fruit. We're missing an opportunity. Because what I've learned from going to a lot of conferences, which have longevity conferences that mainly have elderly people, is they don't understand social media. They don't understand that just clicking a like, clicking subscribe, clicking the notification bell, those have massive impacts on the YouTube algorithm. And same thing, every Twitter, liking, retweet, following, blah, blah, blah. All these things can actually have a huge impact over the long term as these social media technologies and platforms become more and more prevalent. Because last time I checked, they're all continuing to grow and grow and grow and become more important in our lives, especially in a pandemic when everybody's pretty much at home, glued to their screens. And so another aspect of what you said that I wanted to point on is basically with the social media stuff is, you know, what are you going to do once you graduate, once you get your PhD? Are you going to take your channel to the next level? Have you thought about that much yet? Because I've seen other science experts, you know, doctors, and they've quit their practices because like their YouTube channels have blown up into, you know, multi-millions. And I could personally see yours getting that way if you stay on this path and as longevity and life extension becomes more popular. So that'd be kind of hard to just like stop and then start doing something else. That's my perspective. So what I'm sure you thought about these things. What's your perspective?
Yeah, no, I've definitely thought about it. I guess from my perspective, I love research, and I think even knowing what potential my channel has, I think even after finishing my PhD, I'd like to take probably a couple of months to just do a bit of traveling, but then to go into a postdoc because I just love research and having the ability to take like my questions and actually test them in practice. But I guess from what you're saying about it, maybe getting too big a commitment, maybe I'm naive, but I don't know. I mean, at the moment, I can still produce and do my PhD. If I can finish a PhD and have a YouTube channel, then I feel like I can juggle a postdoc. But I mean, I guess, yeah, I don't know. It's too early to say. I mean, anything can happen, right? I'm also hoping potentially to move abroad for a postdoc as opposed to staying in Cambridge. So many things could happen, really. So yeah, I'm just open to possibilities, but I think I'd be upset if research left my life completely.
Right. Okay. Great answer. And one other thing to address what you said is, yeah, I mean, I think you're at like 9,000 something subscribers on YouTube right now. Is that right?
I think so. It's madness, right?
Well, no, but what you said, he was like, I'm very small on YouTube compared to others. And that's true. Like there's channels with, you know, multiple millions and tens of millions of things, but you're doing it focusing on aging. It's not like you started off like doing cat videos or something just to get user subscribers and then try to hit them with longevity science. What's impressive is that you've been doing it focusing on aging the whole time. And our community is so small right now, but it's clearly growing and will continue to grow. So it will be interesting to see as that, you know, continues to play out over the next few months and years, how that evolves, because I could definitely see there being some big science channels like SciShow, for example, starting to shift more of their content to aging. And then who knows, maybe at one point, one of these channels just becomes like all they're talking about is aging, because that's the most important and impactful thing to improve your health span and your lifespan, which we already know. So I'm just waiting for these like floodgates to open and the tides to kind of turn, you know, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out. So hopefully the audience understands that. I don't expect everybody to be like YouTube experts, but as like two content creators talking here, it's very impressive that Eleanor has grown this channel with just focusing on longevity science from the beginning. And the reason why is because you do it so well. You're such an effective communicator. So I'll say one more time, If you haven't yet checked out her channel, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell as well too. So that's my spiel. Eleanor, what's in the works for Sheekey Science Show coming up? Like, what ideas do you have? I know you always listen to your audience. I comment a lot on your channel. What are some future episodes that we can expect that you're excited about?
So yeah, I mean, this is gonna sound a bit bad, but I'm a bit of a last minute person. But
Procrastinate.
At least the next couple of videos are going to be very senescence based. It was my lab meeting this week, so actually it was yesterday. So I've been reading a lot of senescence work recently, so I want to talk about that probably in the next couple of videos, and then there may be some more interviews coming, and then yeah, I'll just let it take me wherever it takes me. I mean, I like to keep up. Like, obviously, you present for Lifespan News, and you always have the latest research, and so for me, I can't really predict necessarily what I'm going to talk about because I like to cover the latest work. I have some topics I know I've been meaning to talk about for a long time, and some like books I want to read and then do kind of my book reviews on. So I mean, I have like a spreadsheet of like all of the possible ideas. It's just a matter of what I feel like talking about that week. Because I mean, I can't make a video if I don't feel invested about talking about it. Because I mean, it generally takes me ages to make a video. So I don't want to, feel like it's a chore. I want to enjoy the process. And so I just talk about whatever I find fascinating or inspiring that week and try and do it in a way that I think people are going to click on it or watch it. I think back to my earlier work, and as you get on YouTube for longer, you know what kind of videos people want to watch. And then like thumbnails and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I've learned so much from just this channel. And so I want to make something that is of relevance to people as well as of interest to me.
Definitely. Yeah. The thumbnails are very important. The title, the hashtags you put in the description. I didn't know any of this stuff. And I've been watching YouTube for years before I like tried to actually start being more of a creator and interviewing these people. And it's a lot of work and it's crazy. So just it's so commendable what you're doing, and most people just don't appreciate it and don't understand it, but I definitely do. And so I just really commend you and thank you for all the work, effort, energy that you are putting into your channel, because it's phenomenal. And I really do believe that you're just getting started. I mean, I could see, your channel having millions of subscribers in a few years. So I'll just say, keep up. I know you smile, but like, here's what I say. You might've heard this quote before, Eleanor. People overestimate what they can get done in a day and underestimate what they can get done in a year. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I've had that.
And they've done, psychological studies on this stuff, and it's true. So, and I didn't even say a year, in a few years, I think that it's a realistic outcome. So yeah, I'd just say, keep up the good work. So what are some other things that you have upcoming or that you're excited about in longevity? I could ask this is normally a question I save more towards the end, but like, what we have to do to solve the human aging problem? I mean, you're doing everything that you can. We've talked about your story about how you've had an interest in science and then it evolved into longevity science specifically. You have a master's, you're getting your PhD. You have this journalistic communication skill set and experience as well too. You're packaging that all together, plus your experience of watching YouTube and learning about that. And so that's how we have this powerhouse of what we're experiencing now with the Sheekey Science Show. But like, let's go more general, like for any individual, like what can they be doing to help solve the human aging problem? What do you think?
So, yeah, I mean, I think at the moment it's just kind of talking to people about it, because I mean, it's something I don't know how often it comes up in conversation with people, right? Because it's something that does affect all of us. I don't know if you're very British, you will go, oh, the weather looks pretty grim today, or that's like what we talk about. But I think there's so many like other more interesting things that should come up in conversation. And to be honest, I think I find with my background, I tend to drive that into conversation these days. But often when I talk to larger groups of people and people I don't necessarily know, and I bring it up, they do often look at me like, I don't know, like blank face. And I think it's just about, at the moment, it probably is just science communication is the best thing that we can do to just spread the message. And I guess also bringing in more government's awareness as well would help with that. And then again, with like news articles and getting more media onto it, but in the right way. So like not saying something that isn't correct or getting the facts wrong or overhyping something. So maybe finding some better way of re-educating science communication. I don't know.
Yeah, your video last year in 2020 on the hyperbaric chamber, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, kind of really laying out the science there, because the media kind of ran with it and got it wrong at like every single major media outlet, which is not surprising, but it continues to be frustrating that it's, 2020 last year and the general media, mainstream media, is still incredibly ignorant and sensational when it comes to aging science and understanding what actually does slow, stop, and reverse aging compared to just aspects of aging, like having, telomere lengths grow. But we have like tons of different cells throughout our body, and there's telomeres in all of them. So it was actually just the white blood cells of the immune system of the telomeres that lengthened from the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. So that science communication is just so important. That's why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, and why you are as well too. So I would encourage, the audience to get involved in any way that you can. Start a company, start a YouTube channel, any type of social media, Reddit. If you like writing, you can do more Medium. That's, just my personal advice. And then once again, plugging the Sheekey Science Show, support the Sheekey Science Show and Eleanor Sheekey, and then other content creators out there. I volunteer my time for Leaf because I think that they're absolutely incredible. And I'm in a financial position to be able to do that. I've been following their work for years, and so I'm honored to do that as a volunteer. So let's shift it, Eleanor, to a similar question, but separate. What do you think scientists, like governments, should be funding research on, and scientists, universities focusing on aging, or the ones even better that are not focusing on aging that should? At all sorts of, Stanford, Harvard, Cambridge, all these prestigious institutions over the world, what should they be focusing their research on specifically? Yamanaka, factors, telomerase, gene therapy, and so on and so forth. What do you think is most important?
So yeah, I think there's two ways you can kind of break it down. So you have like the so-called basic research, which is the fundamental understanding of the different signaling pathways that we can potentially manipulate. And then there's like the clinical trial aspect, which is being able to test different interventions to see if they're going to be effective. So I guess my knowledge is more from the basic research understanding, because that's what I do. And I think, it's right. Like the example I always use is like with CRISPR, where it came from something that they were investigating what these weird sequences were, and then it led to something amazing. And so I think I still agree with that. You should just study, anything really, because you never know what it might lead to. But I think being a bit more specific, one thing that is needed is better biomarkers to be able to test interventions in the clinical study. So being able to bring those two sections a bit more closer together. And so, I know a lot of research is being done in terms of looking at epigenetic patterns, because they're something that we can quite easily measure. One thing that I think has a lot of potential that is harder to kind of examine are like the protein changes. It's not quite so cheap and scalable to do that compared to just doing some DNA sequencing. So I think definitely a lot of research on biomarkers and understanding different biomarkers in different tissues, and working out whether, different, what the other things I mentioned is personalized medicine, and understanding the relationship between different genetics and different gene expression patterns to different proteins, to different environmental factors, and how they all interrelate. It's not easy to necessarily study that at the basic research level. The other thing I wanted to mention was the systemic system. So understanding how the brain signals with the gut microbiome, with the rest of our organs. Like another area that I'm fascinated by is the circadian rhythm. But the thing is, it's insane to even comprehend how you can examine that on a human being just from basic research. Obviously it's amazing how much we know already, but it's just insanely complex. And it gets to a level where like you then need to use things like artificial intelligence and deep learning patterns to like be able to put that data together and to understand it. So yes, it gets to a point where it gets a bit too complicated, but yeah, I think there's much that could be done.
Yeah, you made a lot of good points there. I just want to kind of touch on a few things that I heard. So the microbiome, I've been super fascinated about that for years, and I signed up for my wife and I for Viome, Viome. It's NAVEEN Jain's company, and we interviewed him on my longevity channel last year. I'll put a link in the description below. Very interesting guy, billionaire, very, very passionate about what he's doing with Viome. I think that it helped me and my wife, but I don't know for sure. We'll have to see the science play out. But the microbiome 100% is incredibly important for human health. Our bodies have about 40 trillion cells in them, give or take on average, the human body. But it's believed that the microbiome has somewhere around 100 trillion cells in them, which are non-human and have non-human DNA in them, which is like kind of crazy to think that we actually have more cells, not like by weight, it's not like bigger mass because they're tinier, smaller cells than our human cells, but we actually have more cells that make up our human body that are non-human in DNA than are human DNA. Like, learning more about this stuff is just, the onion keeps getting revealed and it gets getting more and more complex and just weird, quite frankly. But the microbiome is super important. So I'd encourage people to check out that. You also mentioned proteins just now. Your video on AlphaFold and the protein folding from last year, I thought that was huge news. We reported on that on Lifespan News. So let's focus on that. Let's focus on the fact that this came from Google's DeepMind. Google acquired a company called DeepMind, I believe, in like 2011, and their team is there in, I believe they're in London. They're definitely in the United Kingdom, so they're near you. And they've been working on these very innovative, very esoteric, unique, deep learning systems, and they actually created AlphaGo that beat the best Go player on the planet in 2016. And that took a lot of people, that hit mainstream news, and there's a documentary on Netflix I recommend, but it took a lot of people by surprise. So then they did it again in last year in 2020 with AlphaFold, which is a subsidiary of Google and under the DeepMind, and they solved the protein folding problem. So Eleanor, share with the audience, like, what does that mean, and where do you think this will lead as far as this protein folding problem being solved?
So yeah, the protein folding problem basically refers, our cells are incredible in terms of what they are capable of. And so we have 20 different amino acids. And so a protein is simply just a long polypeptide, which is just a chain of these different amino acids put together. And so different proteins have different lengths and they can have different amino acids. And so the number of possibilities of proteins itself is insane. But then you've got to think about it. These proteins are produced in a process called translation, where you go from mRNA to protein. And so it kind of just comes out in a linear matter. But proteins have a 3D structure. And in many cases, proteins form oligomers. So they form with other proteins and have these quaternary structures. And so they somehow, in the cellular context, where you've got different metabolites flowing everywhere, you've got certain conditions, it somehow has to know how to fold into that correct shape, because if it doesn't fold into the correct shape, it can't perform its correct function. And so that's why diseases like Alzheimer's disease, where you've got these aggregates of amyloid beta and tau, these proteins have aggregated, and so they can't do their normal function. And so protein folding is incredibly important for just normal function of cells. But understanding that structure and how that folding happens so rapidly is something that's just kind of inconceivable to us just to try and understand. And so if we want to know a protein structure, the best way to do it at the moment is by using different biochemical approaches, such as X-ray crystallography or cryo-EM is the biggest thing at the moment for getting nice high resolution structures. But these are very laborious processes that they're quite expensive. They can take a long time. They work for certain proteins, not others. And so what AlphaFold is trying to do is try and predict what a protein structure is just based on its sequence. And you can do that based on the fact that different amino acids have different chemical properties, and you can use that information to dictate how the protein might fold. And so that's what they've managed to achieve, which is pretty impressive. There's so many hurdles to face, like they've done it with a decent number of proteins, but there's be more interesting to understand how protein complexes form. And also there's certain proteins that have these intrinsically disordered regions. So they don't even have a specific 3D structure. And these are quite important for regulatory processes. So that's something that I'm not sure if, AlphaFold would really be useful because they have no structure. But again, they're quite interesting to understand.
Wow, very detailed description.
Sorry, yeah, that's way too detailed.
Don't apologize. It was phenomenal. I was like hanging on your every single word, just how brilliant you are and how well you explained this, because it's certainly not the way that I would have explained it. And you did it much more eloquently and better than I could. So bravo. So have you kept up with AlphaFold at all since, the news was reported, gosh, over 6 months ago now? Do you have any idea if they're doing anything to continue on that project?
I'm sure they are. I honestly haven't really had the time to look into what they've been up to since then. They did say at the time they were trying to think about taking it to the next step and think about how two proteins might interact and get their structure. But I don't know much more than that.
Part of this stuff is just so frustrating. I'll just share a really quick story. So, I worked at a few startups in Silicon Valley. 3 of them got acquired. I worked at lynda.com, an e-learning company. We got acquired by LinkedIn, and then LinkedIn got acquired by Microsoft. And I worked at a company called 3PAR in 2010 that got acquired by HP, and I stayed there for a couple of years. So my point is that I've worked at startups in Silicon Valley and also massive corporations that are more like bureaucracies where one hand can't talk to the other hands type of thing. So Google Calico was announced in 2013. I remember when that happened, I was really excited. I've been following, the longevity field for a long time. And then I even had been to Calico's headquarters in South San Francisco. They were my account in 2017 when I was at LinkedIn, specifically because I convinced higher up directors to get me that account because I just wanted to go there and meet with them and stuff like that. But when I interviewed Aubrey in his office in July of 2019, I asked him about Calico, and basically we agreed it's still just a dumpster fire, for all intents and purposes. It's not that they haven't invested billions of dollars. It's not that the co-founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, don't want Calico to be successful. It's not that they haven't taken a lot of aging researchers from their university jobs and brought them in with higher pay, better incentives and things like that. It's that I just don't think that they're working smart enough. So my hope is that Google Calico will now be teaming up with DeepMind, which is, the conglomerate within a conglomerate. The DeepMind is the one that controls AlphaFold, and that they'll be working together to try and solve the human aging problem. But I guess the problem with Google being a publicly traded company is they're very secretive about this stuff, and we don't really hear any updates until it's already done. So these things tend to blindside us when the news gets reported. Part of that has to do with exponential technologies, just kind of not being relevant until they just take off. But part of it also has to do with big governments or corporations or universities being very secretive with their research until they have something to share. So my hope is that we can create more of an open source network in the longevity and anti-aging biorejuvenation field where we're all working closer together as a community. So, with us being content creators, you with the Sheekey Science Show, me with, Lifespan News and this BrentNally, my personal channel, everything's out there. It's what you get is what you see. We're publishing content. So with all that being stated, Eleanor, what is your perception on how you can help disrupt, help change within the academic community and convince more of your colleagues, once you get your PhD to have more of that mindset I described? Can you share some thoughts about that?
Yeah, sure. This is something I actually actively talk about with my fellow PhD friends. We all kind of share the same passion. There's so much, so much of science is about getting funding to do the research that you want to do. And so inevitably a lot of that's having funding and having your own kind of research focus that's slightly different to what anyone else might be doing. And then the other big thing about career progression in academia is about publishing well and having high impact papers. And so there's a lot of pressure on being able to publish well and to have well-cited papers, because that will help you get to better, work up your way to being a group leader if that's something that you want to do. And the thing is, by having that kind of nature where you want to be the first author of a paper that does really well, it kind of makes and in more of a competitive environment. I mean, I try not to see it that way. And I think me and my friends, we also agreed that it kind of drives a kind of selfish approach to science, when science is very much collaborative and depends on other people's insights and people working together. And I mean, at least I'm somewhat hopeful that the people that I talk to, we all seem like this is something we want to strive towards. And so hopefully, things as, we can more easily collaborate through online now, that it will head that direction. I mean, it will take time, I think. There's many like complications in the way science has been structured. But I think it's a big barrier to reaching the state that would actually lead to better discoveries, in my opinion, because if it is more collaborative, and you were like, oh, it doesn't matter where I am on the publication list, and people just forgot about it, that'd be, in my opinion, like people be more open to talking about their science and their findings, and it could lead to better discoveries down the road. So I really hope that is something that we do strive towards, because I think it'll be beneficial in the long run. And I think it just takes a matter of having, I guess, more funding available to scientists, so they don't have the pressure of having to publish well to get the funding in the first place, and also just enable more collaborations. But yeah, there's big problems ahead, but hopefully we can start to solve some of them.
Definitely. And I really appreciate hearing that, particularly from your perspective, getting your PhD right now and hearing, what you and your fellow students, colleagues are discussing, their strategies of it. Because in order to solve a problem, it's important to understand, what the root cause of the problem actually is, as we talk about aging. And
yeah,
that's true within, what you just talked about from a financial and career perspective as well, too. We talked about this briefly, but I just want to mention this as well, too. With Aubrey de Grey, I've interviewed him a couple of times, and he's on our scientific advisory board for my longevity plan company. And I've asked him many times, are you going to write a book anytime? Because he wrote Ending Aging, which was published, I believe, in 2007, which is a phenomenal book. I still recommend people read it today if they haven't.
I'm halfway through it at the moment.
Halfway through? What do you think?
It's been great so far. I mean, I'm thinking, why did I not read this ages ago? But yeah, I'll let you know. I mean, I'm planning to do a summary when I finish this at some point.
So it's still there. Is it fair to corroborate what I stated, that it's still like very relevant today? Like not much of it is really outdated, 14 years later.
Yeah, no, totally. I definitely still recommend it. Even though I'm halfway through. I think it's a very good introduction as well.
And that's what I just stated is kind of like really sad, but also kind of like encouraging from both perspectives. It's sad that we kind of haven't made more progress, but every year that ticks along, and what Aubrey de Grey has been saying for decades, proves to basically be revealed as true, that should give him more credibility and more resources, hopefully, to help us solve the human aging problem. But getting to what I was saying is, I said, hey, Aubrey, are you going to write another book? And he says, basically, he has no plans to right now. He does tons of interviews. I don't know how much people keep up with this. He'll go on any little YouTube channel or whatever that has like basically no subscribers. He's such a kind, intelligent, thoughtful person. We need more kindness in this world. We have a lot of smart people and a lot of dumb people, but we need more kind people. And Aubrey is definitely one of these, just incredibly empathetic, kind person. But my point is that he answers that he believes he's spending his time as wisely as possible by getting this message out, by going on lots of different podcasts and YouTube channels to get the message out to a broad audience. So it's really just more, why I'm saying this is because it's really just more validation for what you have already been talking about, that the science communication of this is incredibly important, because then that will drive perception of governments and of citizens of governments to change, and then they will demand more funding for longevity research, and that's really a big aspect that we need. Do you generally agree with what I just stated there?
Yeah, no, totally. I think you've summarized it very well. It is just about getting the message out and informing people what are the current problems that are preventing progress.
Awesome. So we were just talking about books. You're halfway through Ending Aging. What are some other longevity books that you've read and that you recommend, and maybe some that are on your list that you are looking forward to reading soon?
Yeah, so I think possibly all of the longevity related books I have read, I've already tried to summarize in a video somewhere on my channel. So
I remember that
I guess
I'll link it in the description below. Sorry to cut you off.
That's all right. Yeah, so I mean, the classic ones, well, one that's very recent, which is a very good introduction to what's currently out there and being researched, is Lifespan by David Sinclair. And that's a very good, accessible book. Another book I more recently read was The Longevity Diet. So that's looking more about approaches that you can take that don't actually involve you necessarily taking a supplement or doing anything extreme. It's just about altering very easily what you eat and when you eat, which are things I think anyone could really take on if they wanted to. Just put me on a spot. I'm trying to think. I have read books.
That's Walter Longo's book, right? The Longevity Diet. That's Walter Longo's book, right?
Yes, sorry, yes, Dr. Longo.
I haven't read that book, but I've watched a lot of his content. He's made it onto Netflix like within the last year and a few. Like he was in 2 or maybe
Down to Earth with Zac Efron. I saw him in.
Yeah, he was in Gwyneth Paltrow's little show on Netflix last year in 2020.
Oh, okay.
And then also, yeah, Zac Efron's one, which was cool because I've been following his work for years on intermittent fasting. And he's at, by the way, it's Walter Longo. He's at University of Southern California. Very, very brilliant, well-respected longevity scientist focusing mainly on diet and intermittent fasting, things like that. Sorry, continue with the books.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, you put me on the spot. I'm just struggling to think what I've read.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have quite.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's many more that I do want to read. I mean, for me, I like to read books that I can learn something that I don't necessarily know too much about. So, like at the moment, I'm very interested in like trying to learn a bit more fundamentals of like maths and engineering, because I think one thing in the future will definitely be like the integration of biology with engineering and solving other global problems such as climate change, food availability. So that's something that also interests me.
Yeah, me as well. There's only so much time in the day though, right, Eleanor?
That's true, yeah.
Another book that I have on my list, we've reported on Lifespan News, is by Jean Hebert. And it's his book is Replacing Aging. So I don't know if you've heard of that one, but you know, it's Aubrey has spoken highly of it and some other people. And his basic, and I've watched some of his podcasts. He's been doing kind of the book promotion podcast. He was on the United States Transhumanist Party's channel a couple of weeks ago. And what he's basically saying is that we have replaced every single one of the, I believe there's 78 organs in the body. We've replaced every single one except for the brain. And that's probably coming soon. And so he says maybe we can solve the aging problem by just replacing all of these different organs. Now, obviously, it's like super, super complex, and we can go down the rabbit hole. There's actually neuron cells in the heart that actually have like memories and that feed information to the brain. So if you're like replacing your heart in a way, you're losing those memories, you know? So it's really, really complex, but I think it's interesting. I never find it, there's never a dull moment in the geroscience world, because the ideas that people come up with and the way they articulate and can argue those ideas are very fascinating. So have you heard of the Replacing Aging book?
I haven't, but I'm now intrigued to read it.
Okay. I think we reported on Lifespan News about like 5 or 6 weeks ago or so. I'll try and send you a link, and I'll try and include a link in the description below for everybody. So Eleanor, you've been very valuable with your time. I really appreciate it. Hopefully the audience really appreciates it. What are some, final thoughts or whatever you want to leave the audience with, or whatever's on your mind? If you have more time, we can keep talking. What's on your mind? What would you like to talk about?
Such an on-the-point question. I guess, yeah, one things I like to think about, I also like to think about what the future could possibly be, 50 years from now, because I'm 24. So, I like to think I'm still young and still naive to the world. And obviously so much has happened in those 24 years since I've born. The rise of the internet, social media, the advances in longevity research. And I think I even struggle to think what could possibly happen, by like 2050 and beyond. And obviously if I hope to live a long, happy life, I'll still be around when that happens. What is it that I can do now to make sure that by the future it's a place where I still want to be living? Because things that I think about. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, that's the way that I think about the world too. How do we make the future as awesome as possible? We want to always be constantly improving reality. I've been a Tesla investor since 2012 personally because I believe that Tesla has the best chance of actually solving driverless cars, solving that problem that I mentioned is killing over 3,000 people a year. And I'm a University of Kentucky basketball fan. I'm born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. I went to University of Kentucky for college, and I was just almost came out of the womb rooting for the University of Kentucky Wildcats basketball team. And just, I think this was less than a week ago, one of our freshmen that was going to the NBA, he was going to, get drafted in the NBA and make multiple millions of dollars. Well, he was out training with another one of our players who was also preparing for the NBA. This gentleman's name is Terrence Clarke. He was 19 years old and he just died in a car accident. He's gone. I mean, and it's just really, really sad. It actually does tie into what I was just saying in a way, because all of these organs that we're using to replace are actually coming from accidents. And most of them are, traffic accidents. So if we do solve automobile accidents and all these people are now living, we save 3,000 lives a day approximately, then we're going to have to make sure that we 3D print organs, and that technology takes off. If it turns out that replacing aging is done through, organs. So it's funny, I didn't mean to tie all this together. But the point that I'm trying to make is that the future is not promised, and that you need to focus on what's the biggest impact to make the reality as good as possible. And I'm trying to end all the ways that we die. Aging is just the thing that overwhelmingly does that. And it's this long drawn out process where you're suffering. And it's also really sad too, because if you're old, then you have more life experience. So you should hopefully be wiser and more knowledgeable than like a 19-year-old, for example. But on the flip side, a 19-year-old had their whole life ahead of them and it was just taken. So I'd be interested to hear from you, Eleanor. The reason I got into longevity was I read this book, The Singularity is Near, in like 2006 when I was in college by Ray Kurzweil. So have you heard of that book before, or have you read it?
No, I've never heard of that book. That's another one to my list.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little outdated now. It's written by Ray Kurzweil, and The Singularity is Nearer is supposed to be coming out later this year. I'm not sure. That's the last I've heard of it, but it got me interested in this stuff because Ray Kurzweil talks about 2045 being the year of the singularity, where we're living indefinitely, we've solved the human aging problem, and all sorts of other fascinating things. So I'd encourage you to look into the concept, because if you thought that like the geroscience and the human aging community was like weird and esoteric, then like this is like transhumanism, and it gets kind of like a little religious in a way. And I don't like that. I like to stay focused on like science and things that you can actually prove. But when you look at like exponential technologies and exponential curves, the thing is as we kind of talked about, they just shock you because it's like nothing's really happening when you have doubling at 0.01, 0.02, 0.04, 0.08. But when that doubling gets to like 30, then 60, it becomes more aware. So I'd recommend the whole audience check out The Singularity is Near and Ray Kurzweil's work, but I also recommend you take it with a grain of salt because, it's really complex stuff. Okay, well, Eleanor, I want to really, really thank you for being here today and sharing all of your knowledge, your perspective, your story. Once again, if people haven't subscribed by now, then there's no way in hell they're still watching if they haven't subscribed to your YouTube channel. But if by chance they are, then make sure you subscribe, ring the bell. Eleanor, what are final thoughts for the audience?
Thank you for listening. I guess if you made it this far, then you're doing good and helping to spread the message too. So yeah, just thank you. Continue watching other related YouTube contents. And thank you, Brent, for inviting me on. It's been great to talk to you. Like I said before we started, I already feel like I know you from watching Lifespan News. So it's great to actually talk to you, albeit not in person, but almost. It feels like it's in person.
It does. As I mentioned, I have communication with lots of my longevity enthusiasts and friends, and even my co-founders of my longevity company, Longevity Plan. And I've only met one of them in person out of the four. So I haven't even met three of them in person. And we're on Zoom all day and everything. So it is a very strange and interesting world that we're in. I do feel like I know you, Eleanor, from our communication. And, from it being YouTube specifically, I can hear your voice, but we normally communicate via like messages or YouTube comments or things like that. But it's been such a pleasure, such an honor for me to interview you. I just really appreciate everything that you're doing. And I just really want to encourage you to keep going. And if you're still watching right now, I want to encourage the audience to just follow your dreams, follow your passion. If life seems too tough, then just develop a plan. Eleanor explained how she had this kind of long-term plan, this long-term vision. She didn't really get into the minor details of it, but the point is that you can develop a plan to achieve your dreams, your wants, your wishes, your hopes, desires, your goals. And Eleanor is living proof of that right now. So thank you so much for being here, Eleanor.
Thank you. It was really good fun.
All right, I had a lot of fun too. We'll see everybody on the next video.